Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Culture Gym podcast with Gareth Shackleton and Carly Richards, where we go down the rabbit hole of culture and psychology in organisations. Morning, Carly. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. The sun's shining again, which is always nice. So,
Yes, I think today's going to be a really warm day.
good day. Good day for the start of the weekend.
Exactly.
How's your week been?
It's been really good, kind of samey, just normal work stuff. I've been doing a lot of meetings. I've been, planning the launch of a new project that I'm doing for young people and children, which is exciting. And I was going to mention last night I've been going to for the last month this lovely kind of community thing in replacement of the clap. And it's all because there's a young girl in the town where I live who's been really gone through the mill, bless her. And she had this immune disorder growing up, I believe. I don't know her or the family, but it's something that's touched my heart and many, many other people's hearts in the community. And I just wanted to share it because it's a nice story. So she's been very poorly, bless her, and she had a bone marrow transplant. And then as she had that and came home, I think within a few days she developed the virus. So she had that to deal with as well. She overcame the virus, which was just amazing. And then she suffered an awful lot of complications. We know obviously that a lot of people are suffering complications from the virus, and she's definitely one of them. So she's still in hospital weeks, if not months, after she's recovered from the virus. She's getting chest drains all the time, every day. And so the community, I believe this week she's doing better, which is the best news. That the community has really pulled together to try and raise money for her and her family. So if and when this is all over, she can do something lovely, or it can support the family, or whatever they need any financial support for. And on a Thursday night, in replacement of the clap, we all go to stand out on this big open area. There's under 100, well, probably around 50 people there, if that. Some people sitting in their cars. Many of us kind of just standing not far from our homes and listening. They have this pipe band at play for 10 minutes on a Thursday, 8 o'clock, and it's just lovely. And you can donate a little bit of money towards the cause if you want to. And some people have made cakes to give away, and it's just such a lovely thing. So I wanted to share that kind of positive aspect of community culture, I suppose. And whilst everything's really rubbish with the virus and people are really struggling, there are still moments of kindness and hope and positivity. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed this week.
Often you don't see enough evidence of that kind of thing going on with what's on the news these days, so it's really nice to hear. Those things like that happening all over the country, I'm sure, and where you are too. So fantastic.
So what's been happening with you this week?
Well, working with clients as usual. It's really interesting at the moment. Lots of big goals being set, and businesses are coming out of lockdown and really driving forward. And at least that's what I'm seeing with clients. And it's really nice to see the big goals being set and the changes in direction that people have been forced to take in some cases, but how that's opened them up to new opportunities and new possibilities, and it's great to see people thriving as a result. Business might be tough, and there's lots. We're hearing lots of bad news about business, but there are pockets of individuals and businesses as well that are thriving, and it's great to be part of that.
Yeah, it is. It's always nice to hear. Nice to hear people taking on the challenge and going for it. Which is how it should be.
Exactly, and everybody can do that. It's it almost seems trite, doesn't it, and unfair to people to say it's just making a decision to do it. But at the end of the day, we have to make that decision and then decide whether we're going to go for it. So It's all in the
Yeah.
mind, as you might say. It's all
Yeah.
psychological.
Well, I think certainly coming on from what we discussed last week, that there's been periods of time for everybody, no doubt, where they have this hopelessness, and they don't know how to put their next foot forward and where to go, and they just feel, what's the point? I've had discussions with clients who've said that very thing. What's the point? Like, we don't know how long this is going to go on for, and what have you, way back in the beginning. And I suppose it's about just doing what if you're in that position right now and you're listening to this and you think, well, but I don't know how to, I feel lost. It's about not losing that hope that even just doing the smallest positive thing that day will move you one step forward.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's about doing what you can do and not
Yes.
focusing on what you can't do.
Yes.
And I think it might be a distraction, but at the moment, just doing anything will be better than doing nothing, because
Exactly.
that being in motion and being the action for a start is a distraction, but then being in motion allows you to adapt and change direction and maybe see avenues that you couldn't see before. If you stood still, there's nothing happening. But if you're moving in some direction, it doesn't matter which one to begin with, at least you've got some momentum, and then it's easier to change direction.
Yeah, molecules are moving.
Exactly, it's Brownian motion. Physics.
Well, that's the kind of science that's not my strength. Physics. I love physics, but it's not my strength.
Yeah, so that's what's been going on for me this week.
Good. So today's topic, we're going to be discussing the future of work, I suppose. So what does that look like in terms of, are people going to be working from home more? Companies are obviously going to have to, well, the government have discussed making it mandatory that companies, as much as possible, offer this option of working from home. So whilst it was a necessity in lockdown, it's now going to become the new norm, which is going to completely change dynamics, completely impact culture. And I think we're probably underestimating that as it's all right for the government to say, well, this is what's going to be happening. And I think it can be a really, really positive thing. Something that I've done a lot of research into recently, actually. And I think it can be a really positive thing, but we need to do it correctly, and we need to be aware of certain things, and we need to support people as much as possible.
Yeah, I think being aware and giving some thought to this as well around, the bear traps and the blind spots that we can have very easily in an organization, so that we can deal with them so that they don't become negatives. The thing is, things like, that we've dealt with in organizations for years, like the them and us kind of scenario that we want to avoid. And, we've got another opportunity, that's the wrong word here, but another situation here that could create that kind of them and us kind of atmosphere in an organization. The them that can work from home and the us that can't situation. And avoiding those kinds of bear traps and blind spots that is going to be really important as we go through this shift to more remote working and more flexible working.
So in my research, I've been looking into lots of different aspects and areas of this. And one of the interesting kind of predictions, I suppose, that I'm making is that first of all, there's going to be a really interesting shift of power, I think, in terms of, this was once a perk. We're an organization, we offer this as a perk. You can work from home, come and work for us, which is great for the war on talent, in terms of hiring the best people for the job over and above your competitors. And it's been something that allows employers to be able to say, we're the best employer, right? Because we offer all of these things and all of these options for you. What's interesting when that becomes compulsory then is that you are no longer, as an employer in an organization, you're no longer head and shoulders above your competitor because you offer this thing, because they're going to be offering it too. So then the shift of power moves from the employer to the employee, and it's the employee that can say, okay, I now go to this organization and say, well, this is an offer that you have to give me. I hold the power. I want to work from home. And I think that in itself is going to be a really, really interesting dynamic. But if you're an organization and you want to stand up and head and shoulders above your competitors, you're going to then have to be able to say, okay, we have to offer this. It's about how we offer it that's going to allow us to be the better organization, the better employer. It's about still being able to attract those right people by saying, well, these are all the extra things that we do to support you in that journey. And so it forces organizations, who some of them will be really conscientious about their staff anyway, but some won't. And it forces all organizations to be able to say, this is how we're going to support you in this journey. And this is how we're going to support each other. And this is how we're going to deal with the issues that may come up when this is a thing. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting to watch. But also from a professional point of view, it's certainly going to be an area that I'm going to support organizations with going forward, purely because of my research, because I'm going to hopefully have some really interesting findings to be able to say this is what's going to work. But also I think we've kind of touched upon personality before in this podcast, and it's an area that I'm learning more and more about all of the time.
So before you come on to that then,
sorry.
I think we'll come on to it, I think it's important, but so the way you see this going is that it's not going to be now about whether companies offer remote working and flexible working. It's going to be how they offer it is going to be the differentiating factor in terms of talent attraction.
Yeah, I think so. But certainly if things continue the way that they've kind of been set in motion from the government, as in this is going to be compulsory, I believe so. But even if that's not the case, I do think, and I'm sure many of us think, that working from home, agile working, flexible working options will be far more normal than ever before.
I think a lot of companies are taking it on anyway, whether the government makes it compulsory or not. I think there's so many, because we're very much a service-based economy. So there's a large part of the economy that can undertake remote working, flexible working, whatever we want to call it. And because of the current situation, and because they've tasted it, lots of companies now have seen what this can look like. So some of the fear factor's gone, I'm sure, for some companies. So I think it will become more and more common whether the government makes it compulsory or not. So then it does become about how you're going to offer it, and whether it is just a perk now or whether it's the way that it's done becomes the perk.
Yeah. I'm sure I read a statistic that suggested it was under 17%, I think, of the working population had the option to work from home. And I think when that shifts, so say, for example, that even shifts just to around the 50% mark, which is entirely possible or probable. Imagine how is that then going to shift the whole culture of society, not just the workplace, because then we think, okay, people have flexible options. So, for example, in some of the how that I was talking about, it's about, are people going to be allowed to work from home as a flexible option, or is it going to be a rigid, you must sign in 9 to 5 as per the norm? Because I think the evidence supports flexibility, and whilst the evidence from an HR perspective, a lot of evidence suggests that offering employees the option to work from home is very positive for the organization. But what it didn't, But what the psychological evidence supports from an organizational psychology perspective is it supports the ways in which it digs a little deeper into the evidence, and it supports the ways in which that is then offered.
Mm-hmm.
So for some, because the psychological evidence for or against working from home and flexible working is mixed in terms of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And so then psychologists question, well, why is that? Why is that mixed? Why aren't we just saying, well, this is a flexible option, so therefore it must be a good thing? And they found that it's actually all to do with the way it's offered and the options that people have. So it's about leadership. It goes back to the age-old things that we always know is important in terms of supporting employees. Leadership, options, support, flexibility. So we know that these things are really, really important for
Yeah, I
employees. So
think one of the
we
critical
shouldn't really be,
things in
sorry.
this is determining, what work looks like, in the sense of it's a very industrial age attitude to have people clocking in and clocking out at 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock.
Mm.
We've moved much more, although not completely, towards the idea that it's about a person getting their job done, not about the hours that they spend at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to have to get much better at saying, well, what is the job? What does it look like when your job's done for the day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then perhaps it's going to impact everything from job descriptions to how we recruit, to who we recruit, to it's just, I mean, the implications are massive for this. Exciting, especially if we can learn from mistakes, because we're going to inevitably make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Provided not too many people get damaged in the process. But it's about learning from those mistakes and being able to say, well, just because this is the way it's always been done doesn't mean that that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And being flexible ourselves as organizations.
No, that's right. I think you're right. It is exciting for organizations, and a huge opportunity for them in terms of health and well-being of their employees, in terms of maybe even in a financial sense of reducing overheads. And making businesses leaner and more agile, so that they can adapt more effectively as well to changes coming down the line. One of the biggest problems for businesses, some of the big businesses, is the lack of adaptability. Many businesses haven't adapted to the internet revolution. Some haven't adapted very well to coronavirus. And often the bigger you are, the harder it is to adapt because of inertia. So maybe this will bring in some adaptability as well. All sorts of benefits at all levels that this can bring.
Yeah. And actually, interestingly, I think how employees are supported to adapt to that merge between home life and work life, because what was once a sanctuary of let's not bring work home, let's keep work and home separate. I go to work and I come home and I'm mum, or I'm a completely different role. I'm a partner, I'm a daughter, whoever you are at home. Then you're merging. So then work begins to impact home life. And can you imagine how awful that would be if you either don't enjoy your job, you're not happy at work, you find work incredibly stressful, and you're then bringing that home into your sanctuary? Can you imagine the impact that this is going to have on society from that perspective? So we need to get that right too. And we're going to move on to our questions soon, but just to kind of briefly touch on the personality aspect. I said to you earlier before we started, it's going to be really interesting to see how the dynamic shifts between, we're a very extroverted society in terms of work. Whoever shouts the loudest wins, whoever, markets themselves the most wins. And I think that will remain. But interestingly, I think it will allow introverts to shine behind a computer, behind a screen perhaps. And I mean, time will tell. We will see. We'll have to research that and get the evidence to support it. But I predict that introverts will feel more able to put their best foot forward and to allow themselves to shine. So I think that's going to be interesting as well. We're going to see some shifts in that too.
Very good. The age of the introvert is upon us, maybe.
Yeah, how exciting, especially for someone who's kind of borderline introvert, me.
The ambivert. Yeah. Very good. Well, I guess that brings us nicely to the question that we have today, which we could tie into personality in a way. This is the differences between psychology and neurochemistry or neurology, and the similarities even. And because you bring it into personality, that's very much a psychological construct, the idea of personality, extroversion, introversion. So how does that map into neurology and neurochemistry?
Well, so interesting. This is almost like you and I, because my background is psychology. Your background is definitely more neurological than mine.
Yeah. Just so that I don't get caught out by anybody thinking I'm a neurologist, it's more biochemistry. So
yes,
it's more the biological aspect here, which is why the question comes up, really.
Yeah. So I mean, psychology, we deal with behavior, emotions, cognition, which was something I definitely really enjoyed in my undergraduate, but certainly not something that I've pursued. So whilst the aspects of the brain and cognition do come into some of my work, it's not necessarily something that I'm an expert in. There'll be far more people better placed to discuss it than I. But I think it's I don't know, there's definitely lots and lots of overlap, because we know that a lot of research on personality, for example, has been studied with MRI scans and looking at the activity, the neurological activity in the brain, whilst we're kind of measuring the behaviors and the personality traits of that individual. So there's definitely huge amounts of crossover there. I think neurology deals with, the brain, obviously, and the way that the brain controls the functions of what we do and what our body does.
And as you said, there have been studies that have demonstrated particular pathways in the brain being activated more in extroverted people. We're just using that as an example, than in introverted or in people who are more agreeable or open to experiences. They light up different parts of the brain, and so there's definitely these correlations between psychological descriptions of the way people behave and think and what's actually going on in the brain. I think it's interesting as well that a lot of this is genetic. There's a very strong genetic component to personality and other psychological constructs as well. Very strong heritability.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of evidence there to support that as well. So I think whilst students, individuals can go down a pathway of studying psychology or neurology or biology, all of the ologies, I think there's huge amounts of crossover between all of them. And what's interesting, when you have been a student of that, you definitely get to explore certain parts of the other.
This is one of the interesting things about science, that historically it's taken a very reductionist approach, meaning breaking things down into smaller and smaller parts in order to study them, because it's easier to study if you just get down to a small part and you just change one variable at a time and see what the impact is. And that's been the scientific approach over the last 500 years probably, since the Renaissance. But because of the rise of computer power, we're starting to get to the point where we don't need to take that approach anymore, and we can look at systems as a whole. And systems could be a human being or a collection of human beings, an organization even, and we can start to look at psychology and neurology and biochemistry and politics and economics and history, and bring all of these subjects together and study them as a system. So the opposite of the reductionist approach, a systems approach. and study them
Which,
from that point of view and really start to understand what's going on now.
yeah, I struggled with the reductionist approach. That's one thing that I struggled with in terms of, you know, when it came to making a decision about specifically what's that tiny little thing that I wanted to find out, because I always used to think, well, but no, I want to find out all of these things so I can have a much bigger impact on everything. And it's really hard actually to kind of just nail it down to one minuscule aspect of the bigger picture.
Well, that's right. You spend a whole career, 50 years or so, studying one tiny, minuscule aspect of the subject and become very expert in it. But I think, again, we're talking about culture here. There's an opportunity, but there's also a trend perhaps towards multidisciplinary approaches so that you can get that big picture and you're not focusing on the minutiae. And also to I've forgotten what the second point was, but it's that bigger picture idea, that trend towards generalization, generalism rather than specialism. There's going to be a massive culture shift as well going forward as we start to realize that generalists are needed in order to bring together all of these topics that we've divided up arbitrarily: psychology, neurology, biology, genetics. We've arbitrarily divided them up in order to study them, but now generalists are going to be needed to bring them together. And just to kind of close that out in terms of the culture, Jim, I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do is, in a very small way, be more generalistic about organizations and culture, and to be multidisciplinary about it. So bringing in psychology, bringing in coaching, bringing in biology even.
Yeah, because it's all very well in having, not to kind of, I think it's all very well having a company who can specialize in one aspect of this will improve your culture, or specialize in one aspect of, this will improve whatever in either your organization, or a sports performance coach who's an expert in dietary stuff. And that's great, but you need a sports performance coach who's also an expert in training, or starting the run, or I don't know, all of these different things. And I think you need to have that general, that someone who's overviewing the whole lot, to be able to say, well, okay, this is what we need to work on for now, but once we've done that, we're going to be able to go on to this, and be able to see the whole picture and the complete outlook in terms of the future as well. How is what we do right now going to then impact what we do next, which will impact what happens in 5 or 6 years' time? So yeah, I think I'm really excited about the way that we're headed with culture, Jim. Actually, it's very...
Me too. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. So we're going to have to close that out and pick this up again next time.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, indeed.
Interesting discussion. So
yeah,
love it.
Good. Take care, everybody. Have a good week, and we'll be here again next week with another show.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.